Pipsqueak and Saphira kept on galloping down the road. How long had they been running? Who knew for certain? His chest hurt, but he didn't care. His hooves ached. He didn't care. Every muscle in his body was telling him to stop, but he did not care. He kept running despite the pain. Ignore the voices in his head, telling him to slow down or surrender or to kill Saphira. Pipsqueak wasn't slowing down. The same couldn't be said for Saphira, who had slowed to a stop. Pipsqueak grinded to a halt, nearly tripping over the sudden stop. "Saphira, what is it?" Did that buck from earlier hurt her worse than Pipsqueak had realized? He did not try to think about Schootaloo right now. Maybe it was something else. If she was hurt, how would she escape? Pipsqueak, I've been thinking a lot about it. And what Schootaloo said before. Her voice trailed off, touching the scar on her eye. How did I survive when no one else did? You hid in a hollowed-out tree. That's what you told me. Did it really just stop when morning came? You said the lantern, it protects. I was wrong, Pipsqueak. I'm not afraid of the light at all. Everyone who was attacked had a lantern. It did nothing to protect them. Saphira looked back to where they ran from. It followed me, all the way to Ponyville. Or maybe it wanted me to go here. I don't know. I know you might think I have all the answers, but I don't. I don't know. I make logical guesses, but I don't know everything. I do know one thing, though. It wants me. I can hear its whispers creeping into my brain, telling me to do things, just like with Schootaloo. Like with everyone else. How long before I start blacking out, waking up somewhere I don't know? All of this is my fault. I brought it here. And I'm so tired already. The glow from Saphira's horn was fizzling out. It was obvious that she was struggling against a magical burnout. What are you trying to say? Pipsqueak asked, praying to Luna she wasn't going to do what he thought she was going to do. The speech was just like, "Go, Pipsqueak." She was going to do it. The heroic sacrifice. She was going to stay behind, fight it, and give Pipsqueak enough time to escape. Well, he was not about to let that happen. You can't! Everyone's gone now. It's just you and me. Please, don't leave me out here alone. He was only able to come this far because he was never truly alone. The few seconds back when he was alone were the most terrifying of his life. He hated it and didn't want it to happen again. There was no way he could survive out here on his own. Die. He touched her horn with his head. Don't listen to the voice. Never listen to the voice. No matter what happens, don't ever listen. Don't trust it. Don't believe it. Fight it every step of the way. Pipsqueak couldn't control his sobs anymore. Why are you saying these things? Saphira, don't go. I'm sorry, Pipsqueak. She planted herself firmly on the ground. She turned to see the green light gaining on them. You can't hear it, can you? The music, the whispers. It's like claws on a chalkboard, all the time. Pipsqueak, the reason I came with you on this adventure, it wasn't because I thought we were friends. I came here to kill this monster. There was only one way this story was ever going to end. One of us was going to die. Then I'm staying too. I can help you fight. He couldn't just let her fight alone, especially not in her condition. That kick from Schootaloo was obviously still bothering her. In addition, Saphira had used a lot of magic tonight. It was nothing short of a miracle she hadn't burned out when she had teleported the 3 Foals a few inches. How much magic could she possibly have left? Definitely not enough to take out the remaining 12 ponies and the Pied Piper. Besides, what kind of friend does that? No. He'd lost everything already, and he was not going to lose another pony to this monster. Saphira trotted slowly away and turned towards him. She paced around him curiously, as if examining him carefully. Then she spoke in a low whisper. "No, you can't." Before he could react, she telekinetically shoved him into a hollowed-out tree. "Good thing you're so small," she said as she set up a barrier. She could hear his anguished cries from the other side of the barrier. He banged on the barrier with his hooves for a few seconds before realizing how pointless this was. He fought back the tears as hard as he could. "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Pipsqueak, look at me." He shook his head, just staring down at his hooves. "Pipsqueak, please. I'm sorry." She touched her hoof to the barrier, and Pipsqueak reluctantly did the same. "If I win, I'll come back and get you. If I die, well, you'll know." She turned to face the green light. "It's been fun, before all this happened. With you, and Schootaloo, I mean. It was fun. I really would have liked to spend more time with everyone. Maybe get to know Applebloom and Sweetiebelle better. Even Tiara looked like she was going to turn over a new leaf. I really wanted to go nightmare nighting with all of you." She opened her scarred eye, wanting him to see the truth, though it just raised more questions for the little foal. She stared straight into his eyes. "Remember, don't listen. Don't let it in. Don't let it see your fear. Push your emotions down and focus on the task ahead. You're small, but you're stronger than you realize. You have the makings of a real hero, and heroes destroy monsters." "Why are you saying these things?" He choked back the tears. He knew what kind of speech this was. "Because I'm not a hero. I'm a scared little filly, about to do something I should have done a long time ago." And then, with a sad tear-stained, genuine smile, she told him, "Pipsqueak, stay alive, my friend." With those last words, she galloped out of sight. "Saphira!" he called after her. Then he shut his eyes when he heard the screech. A minute later, he saw the green light stop nearby. He could hear a loud sniffing sound around the tree. He shrank into the back of the hollowed-out tree, making himself as small as possible. He could see a vague shadow on the ground outside. "Don't look this way." His ears perked up, staring in the direction Saphira went, and dashed in the direction faster than his large body was capable of. The silence was the worst part. "Saphira, no." He didn't know how long it had been in that hollowed-out tree. He just couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened, everyone who died. He should have done something more. He should have tried harder. He should have... His self-pity parade was cut short when the barrier blocking him from the outside suddenly started to lose its color until it completely vanished. "Saphira?" He cautiously stepped out of the hollowed tree, but he found no mane or tail of the red-eyed, pale-white unicorn. If she wasn't here, and the barrier disappeared, that could only mean... No. He wordlessly muttered. No time to rest, though, because he just heard the screech from far off, and it sounded pissed. "Run! Run!" He urged his shaking limbs forward, hitting his hind legs as he did. He was sprinting faster than he'd ever sprinted before, his legs threatening to break under the constant strain. "Miss Sakura's hut. Just have to make it to Miss Sakura's." He heard the screech getting louder, sounding much more urgent. "Go faster! Go faster!" He could faintly see the sickly green light off in the distance. Every once in a while, he'd look back and see a dark, full-shaped figure falling behind him. "Ah!" he cried out. "Help!" He called, but no answer came. The forest's foliage cut and stabbed at his hide, but he didn't stop. Stopping meant death. Stopping meant no one ever knowing what happened to the ponies who went into the Everfree Forest. Stopping meant that the sacrifice of Schootaloo and Saphira would have been for nothing. He could take a little bit of pain if it meant a lot more living. The voice in his head kept telling him to stop, to slow down, that it's not so bad. No, he knew who that voice was. Don't let it in. He couldn't listen to it. He couldn't let it tempt him. Something jumped out in front of him. He swerved to the side, but tripped on a tree root. Trembling, he fell flat on his face. He felt something hard pierce through his hind leg. He tried to stand, but a sharp pain stopped him. He looked down to see a gash along his hind leg. It hurt to move. Regardless, he tried crawling. Not gonna surrender. Not gonna give up. He kept telling himself, even as the dark figures slowed their pace to a light trot, encircling him, trapping him. They were mocking him. He saw the figure in the green light casting a shadow over him. Then he heard the screech. He wanted to be brave and look death in the face, one last time, defiant to the end. But he was just a foal. He hid his head under his hooves, waiting for the inevitable. He just hoped it would be quick. He heard the screech, and then the crashing sounds. Crashing sounds? He opened his eyes to see the blue fire was separating himself and the pale figures of his former classmates. The dark figures had turned their attention to a hooded mare tossing things at them. "Back! Go to the Everfree, lest you wish to tangle with the likes of me!" The heavily accented voice of Zecora boomed over the screeching and hissing. There was another explosion, and he heard a pained howl. Something wet splashed onto his cheek. The light started fading, and he heard footsteps vanishing into the distance. For a while, all was silent. Zecora trotted up to Pipsqueak, nudging his head with her muzzle, then smiling at him. Pipsqueak could no longer fight back the tears. He jumped straight at Zecora, hugging her tightly as he sobbed uncontrollably. Letting out all the pain, all the fear, everything came out before this wonderful, caring Zecora, who wrapped her hooves around him, ensuring him that everything was going to be fine now. He was safe. It was over. It's never over. When Pipsqueak finally returned to Ponyville, he had to confront the families of the ponies lost to the Everfree. He claimed it was all his idea, not wanting to ruin Schootaloo's name. The stares hurt the worst, even more than his injured hind leg. For the next week, ponies went in and out of the Everfree Forest, looking for the lost foals, but there were no traces of them. Pipsqueak found the discarded runes, but no trace of the bodies. Not even the monster could be found in the daylight. He felt like he'd left something behind, not just his friends and classmates, but part of himself. The experience changed him. He'd never really be the same again, no matter how hard any pony tried to tell him that it was all over. Not that they really had any kind words for him. It's never over. It took a long time, but eventually the nightmares got to him, and he was checked into a psych ward after a failed suicide attempt. Why did he try to commit suicide? His room faced the Everfree Forest, so every night he'd hear their voices calling out to him, beckoning him to return and be with all his friends. They promised how wonderful it was. Even Saphira and Schootaloo were happy. The whispers in his brain wouldn't stop, even with medication. They wouldn't stop. Over time, he learned to shut them out, but they were always there, in the back of his mind, always keeping him on edge, and always saying the same thing, like a song stuck on a loop. Years came and went, as Pipsqueak spent many of his days in the psych ward in the Ponyville Hospital. "Not yet," is what he kept repeating every other day. "I'll go back to you soon." He would always say those words every so often. He had escaped from the Everfree on that nightmare night many years ago. But it wasn't done yet. No, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Like Saphira said, There was only one way this story was ever going to end. One of us was going to die. But this was going to end in blood, one way or the other. And Pipsqueak was going to make sure that it wasn't his blood. Because what Sakura showed him years ago gave him a small sliver of hope. Whatever was in that forest, hunting foals who went astray, Pipsqueak was privy to two pieces of information. It could feel pain, and it could bleed.